BlizzConline. Welcome to Overwatch Community-Made Creations in the Workshop. I'm Dan Reed, software engineer on the Overwatch team.
And I'm Zach Metcalf, software engineer on the Overwatch team. And today we're going to be highlighting some amazing creators and the modes that they've made using Overwatch's in-game scripting system called the Workshop. We are super fortunate to be joined today by 4 very talented creators whom we'll be interviewing shortly. And toward the end of the panel, we'll be answering some of our community questions.
But first, let's take a quick look back at a few of the excellent game modes our players have made.
All right, well, now we have Kevlar, who has been developing Workshop modes since the beginning of time and is responsible for such classics as McCree's Hot Potato, Last Man Bouncing, and Steal the Crown. Kevlar, welcome to the panel.
Hey, what's up? I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here, and I just want to start, I have to know, the Last Man Bouncing, where did this idea come from? Like, what prompted you guys to go down this avenue?
All right, I gotta give most of the credits for the idea to Jinko, he's the creator of Enhanced Data Paintball. And so I was helping him adding the Idios map to his map pool, and he created a jump pad like out of bounds, which was in the shape of a sphere to get the high ground. And so he had an idea, and he just created a mode where there's a big sphere that you can jump on top, and it was progressively shrinking. And he just showed this to me. It was like, that seemed kind of cool, but I don't know what to do with it. So I was with him, I was just, yeah, we can do some mode where you can push people off the big balloon, for example. And we said, okay, maybe we can try Lucio and like use his boop. So we tried a bit, and we were like, yeah, that's kind of fun, but it's not that cool. So we said, okay, we can do like other heroes, but damage actually knocks you backwards. So we tried some other heroes like Zarya or Genji, and then we tried Reinhardt. And like with the fire strike and the charge and the swinging your hammer on other people, and we were like, wait, that's really fun.
Yeah, I think Reinhardt is definitely like perfect for that mode. It's really cool to hear like, you know, how an idea like comes to form from basically what sort of sounded like an accident at first, then you realized there was potential there and like grew into it. That was really cool. I wanted to ask about McCree's Hot Potato. So your videos on YouTube collectively for that mode have over 10,000 views. Did you ever expect that mode to become so popular?
Oh, really not. So at first I made this video for Reddit. When I first published it, it was like before I went to bed. I was like, yeah, I made this video. That's like the first time I was editing a video with Premiere. I was like, yeah, it's my first video. It's not gonna do that well, I think. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna post it and go to bed. And when I woke up, I had like over 200 notifications, and I was literally shaking in my bed from excitement. I was like, oh my god. I couldn't believe this was happening. So yeah, I posted them on YouTube too, and they did very well. And I was just very happy that people appreciated my mode, and I thought, you know, I really did my job to make it so that people had fun with this.
That's awesome. I can't believe that's actually, it's been 2 years nearly since that first happened, since Workshop first came out.
Yeah.
Now that you have all this experience making modes, you've made so many modes, what are you working on now? Do you have any secret projects that you want to give a quick tease about? Like, what's coming next from Kevlar?
Yeah, right now I have a pretty big project right now. I'm trying to make a roguelike, which is very hard to do with the tools we have, especially with bots. But I think I can make it happen. I have a pretty good base that's done, but I want to add a bunch of items. I think my main inspiration for this would be Risk of Rain. I think they did a roguelike very well. And I'm going to make my own sort of item system with bosses and stages. I think it's going to be very fun, but it's also going to take time to make.
Well, you have a pretty impressive list of game modes that you've made. Is there anything that you're most proud of that you've done in the workshop?
I think my most underrated mode that I'm the most proud of is probably 10-second mystery race, which I did for a jam. Like, there's basically nobody playing it, but I find it so fun, to be honest.
Even from a technical perspective, when we saw your bomb defusing mode, that was one of the craziest things. We were incredibly impressed by that mode.
How long does it tend to take you to make all these different modes?
Well, for big game modes like the ones I'm doing right now, I'd say it takes like a few weeks. And then there's like maintenance of the mode later on. But I'd say there's like very small modes. Like the one I do for the jams, they're very short to make. Like, you know, the jams earlier, they were only 2 hours. Now they're longer, they're a few days. But yeah, it really depends on the mode. Sometimes they're more complicated than others. If
you had to just pick like one single coolest thing that you've seen, maybe not even a full mode, but just like some neat thing that you saw someone do in workshop, what would you think?
I gotta give that to Terrorister again. He's so great. This is probably his glitch in the system mode, where he did like the enemy is just like a bunch of glitchy characters like switching around and all this. It looks like pretty scary, to be honest. And like even the HUD itself, it glitches around sometimes, and it changes character in color. And like when you die, there's actually like a jump scare with you know, somber and red and text floating around. Like it was, it's just. Wow. I never expected this to be possible in workshop, to be honest.
That's awesome. I love his modes too. I'd love to know like what other sorts of workshop modes do you hope we see more of in the future, like that, like things that we never expected, or what do you want to see other people make?
All right, this might sound like hypocritical, but I want to see more competitive modes, like ones that can be like added to the official Overwatch pool. I know I haven't done any. I would love to if I had an idea, but I think a good example is Conquest by CACTUSPUPPY. I think like this mode can easily be one of an official mode you can play on quick play or competitive. Like yeah, I've played it a bunch, and you know, like you said on stream, who was it that did the hero ban and the conquest and all that?
There was an SVB stream with
exactly, yeah, SVB.
They tried that mode out. It was great.
Yeah, we saw that. It's easily one of the best competitive games in the workshop out there, I think.
Yeah, for sure. We're big fans of that mode. So since you have us right here, if there's a single thing that you'd like to see added to workshop, some feature, what do you think? What would it be?
Yeah, since I'm doing a roguelike right now, I would probably add something about bots. For example, I think pathfinding would be very useful. Right now, I'm using pathfinding from Delton, and it's working pretty well. But it takes a lot of elements and a big load on the server. I think it being implemented in Overwatch is gonna help a lot. Well, or if we can put it there, just some basic pre-coded behavior on bots. So let's say just wandering around or attacking a player. Or I think what the workshop really needs is some sort of discovery system, I think. Like you could publish a mode and it's gonna pop up somewhere. I don't really have an idea on how this should be done. Or I think the website Workshop Codes is doing a good job with that. But I think it being implemented into the game, like maybe sometimes the most popular modes can pop up in the arcade. Some sort of discovery system to promote new modes or popular modes. I think this is going to be great.
I'd love to know kind of just more about your experience in the workshop community, and just not necessarily like working with other creators, but What's it like being part of the workshop community, like talking with other folks who are making and playing these modes?
Oh, it was so great. Like when I was making my first mode, no, hot potato. I first started and I didn't join any community. It was all by myself. But then I found the Elo Hell Discord, and I joined. It was like thousands of people, and I was so happy to be able to talk about, discovering new things about the workshop and like seeing all the help that was given. I think the community is so welcoming of new creators. Like if they're looking for help, there's always someone there to help, and you can promote your modes and give feedback. I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, we're really happy with how it's all turned out. Are there any creators or modes that you'd like to give a specific shout out to?
Yeah, I'd give a shout out to Jinko, which I know he's no longer active, but he really inspired me with putting my modes out there. Like he was I think the first one to do a trailer and post it on Reddit. Like when I first saw his trailer, like he inspired me so much, and I owe it to him so much. I also want to give a shout out to Andy, which you're probably gonna interview tonight, and and I think he works so hard on pushing new game modes he find cool and putting it on Twitter and like just making it seen by people. And I think he's doing a very good job.
No, and like you said a bit ago, like that sometimes it's so hard to get started. Sometimes it can seem intimidating at first. But I'd love to know from your experience with the community and workshop, are there any encouraging words or just tips and tricks you have for people just starting out with the workshop for the first time?
Yeah. I'd say for new creators, I'd say definitely you can check out some tutorials. I think Taigo is a very good YouTuber you can check out for tutorials on workshop. Also, don't be scared to look for help. You can join Discord servers. They can help. They have a good experience. Like you can also go on the Overwatch forums, and also share your modes. Like you can post on Reddit, on Twitter, on YouTube, everywhere. If you want your mode to be seen, host your modes. I think that's gonna help you like in the beginning a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Kevlar, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah, thanks again.
We're now joined by Tim Lopes, who many of you may know as PMA Jellies. Tim has a wide variety of game modes that he's created, including a montage cinematics tool, a Reinhardt 1v1 duel mode, and even a golf. But he's perhaps best known for his series of training modes, particularly PMA Jellies Aim Training, a mode so good it bears his name. Tim, glad you could join us today.
Glad to be here.
The first thing we want to know is, do you use your own aim trainers when you warm up for comp?
As a Lucio player, not that much. But when the other team's Widow says thanks for the aim trainer, I'm a little bit worried.
So what's next for you? Are you currently working on anything in the workshop? Give us any sneak previews of what might be coming from you.
Yeah, the reason I don't really use my aim trainer is because it's not really like that fun. You're just like shooting circles. So I thought it would be cool to maybe make something like Osu, where there's like music involved with the aim training, just to get like that experience. Like I grew up playing Guitar Hero as a kid, and I like love the like gameplay with the music. So I was thinking of ways where I could incorporate music in my like aim trainer to like make it more entertaining.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Is there any other type of mode you'd want to try at some point?
I was thinking of making this like Overcooked game mode. Instead of Overcooked, it was Overwatched, and instead of making food, you were like adjusting the heroes, like you were the Overwatch devs, where you would give heroes buffs and nerfs. It would be like a 2D platformer. And another thing I was thinking about making was like what I said, like a tutorial for like new players, so they understand the basic mechanics of team fights and like when to go in.
Yeah, I mean, kind of along those veins, like you have your 1v1 Reinhardt mode that really practices that duel. Are there any other heroes in particular you think would work really, really well in a duel mode like that?
Like for a fun duel mode, I guess like Lucio, because whenever you see two Lucios fighting in like a game, you're always like cheering on your Lucio because of like how absurd it is because of their healing output. Other fun game modes would be like Tracer 1v1s and Widow 1v1s.
So I think you're on, last I counted, version 5 of the aim trainers. How long does it take you to make like each iteration of the aim trainer?
I do use a lot of code from my past aim trainers to like get the circle mode, like that comes back every time because of how iconic it is. Usually it takes me like 10, 15 hours of like working on it, but that stretches out like 2 weeks maybe.
So whether it's like a fully completed mode or just like a particular idea that someone realized, like what's the single like coolest thing that you've seen in the workshop?
Definitely Urrod's map editor. I tried to like make platforms out of code before, and it was so buggy I couldn't do it. And then I see Urrod come out with this map editor, and I was just so jealous. I was like, how did you make this?
He's made fully fledged walls and platforms, and
yeah.
I don't know how he did it.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We don't actually know how he did it.
We truly don't know how he did it.
So if there were something that you could add, like a feature that you could add to Workshop, just wave a magic wand, what do you think it would be?
Maybe importing assets like audio and like 3D models or something. Like with my idea for the aim trainer with music, it would be good to like import audio and like have like play settings and pause settings.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about like your experience with Workshop and just even programming in general. Like, have you done any other programming or scripting outside of the Workshop?
I'm a student studying for my computer science degree, so I've already coded in like Java, Python, but also I do video editing. So I make scripts that help me download clips quicker and like record chat for my videos, and that helps me a ton.
What's it like to be known in the community or a part of the Workshop community? Like, I'd love to hear a little bit about like how that Workshop community is.
The Workshop community is crazy helpful. There's like a Discord dedicated to like Workshop, Elo Hell's Workshop Discord. I just usually when I'm stuck on a problem, I go into the help script section and I just type out my problem in like an hour or so I get a solution. So they're crazy helpful. The Overwatch community as a whole is extremely nice. Like every time I queue up, I get super nice comments like thanks for the aim trainer, thanks for the practice range.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really great community. We're so glad that it's turned out the way it has. Speaking of which, are there any other creators or modes that you'd like to give a shout out to while you have the chance?
Definitely follow Andy on Twitter because the stuff he makes in the Workshop is so funny. What he posts on Twitter.
Yep.
we love Andy. So like you've made some really incredible modes out there, and I want to get some words of wisdom for you in terms of, do you have any encouraging tips or words for Workshop newbies out there who are just starting to get into it for the very first time?
At first, it's like super intimidating. Like, what are all these methods that are being used? Like, but if you just start small, like make a small project, you can grow and make huge projects.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good call. Like that's the way you start out. Don't immediately try something big. It's gonna be really hard. Well, we're here at the end. Are there any questions you want to ask us?
Can you tell us like how the Workshop will like say I have my code for the practice range in Overwatch 1? Will that code like be able to be imported in Overwatch 2, or could you tell us that?
We absolutely hope so.
Okay.
And I have neither Zach nor I have any reason to doubt. Actually, well, I shouldn't speak for Zach. Maybe he does have a reason to doubt it. we should just all assume going forward that it's going to work out fine, and Zach and I will work hard to make it.
Sweet.
We'll definitely make sure that everything is as backwards compatible as it possibly can be. So that's not something that you'll need to worry about. We're excited to show you whatever comes next.
Awesome.
Well, I think that's actually all we have for now. So Tim, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for stopping by.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
I am pleased to introduce Kobe Zong, known in the community as CACTUSPUPPY. Kobe is the creator of the highly popular and extremely well-made workshop mode Conquest, for which he has hosted various tournaments. In addition to raising eyebrows of the Overwatch dev team with Conquest, Kobe has also created a number of cool experiments, like a draft mode with picks and bans and a cool scoreboard. Kobe, welcome to the panel.
Hello, happy to be here.
We are happy for you to join us as well. We just kind of wanted to talk about your mode and ask you a couple questions. We'll start off with Conquest. It's a lot of fun to play. Are you surprised at how engaging that mode ended up turning out to be?
Yeah, kind of, because I was like, it's kind of like Koth, right? Like, there's just 3 of them, but you know, originally the inspiration behind Conquest came from other games, which, you know, have similar game modes. So I suppose in retrospect, it shouldn't be that surprising, but it definitely was that a mode that I've made has become that popular and has received that positive of a reception.
So I understand that you ran some Conquest tournaments. Do you have any interesting stories to tell from when you were running those tournaments?
Oh man, so there was one tournament, or there was one match, right? There are these 2 teams, they're playing the best of 3. It's the first match, so you know, a lot of times you have teams that just go, oh, we lost the first one, we'll reverse sweep or something. But it was absolutely insane that this team were down like 40 points or something, and they just mounted this incredible comeback with like a power play that just gave them like, I don't even know, 30 points. And it was just incredible to watch that team just, you know, utilize a mechanic that I put in there to sort of, you know, earn themselves a victory ultimately.
How often do you engage with the workshop? How often do you work on these projects?
You know, when I was making Conquest and in the past few weeks making that Protect and Ban mode, I would say I opened workshop like daily. It was like a thing. Like I'd wake up, I'd eat breakfast, I'd go work out, and then I'd come back and be like, all right, open up the workshop, like start Overwatch. It's really funny too, because all my friends are on my friends list. Like they message me sometimes while I'm in the middle of like using the workshop. They're like, hey, you want to come play? I'm like, really tempted. I'm really tempted. They know that my response, if they see like custom game, you know, in custom game, it's like, nope, I'm sorry, I'm doing workshops.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. Let's see, so obviously Conquest has been a huge success for you. Would you say it's the mode you're most proud of?
I'm not sure actually, because like I'd say in terms of like a singular workshop mode, yeah, definitely. I mean, I keep a version history in GitHub, and I went in there and checked, and I started this project in December of 2019. So it has been 2 years, or no, math is hard. It's been a year since I started working on this. And yeah, I'd say like in terms of where it's ended up, I'd say that's probably my single proudest, like, or the single workshop project on the.
I was just going to ask how long you spent on this and other projects. So you've been on Conquest for a year, but how long do other projects kind of sit on your plate? How long do you usually work on these modes?
Not nearly as long, that's for sure. It really depends, because for a community project we did for creating a workshop trainer for each hero, from inception of the brig trainer to like releasing it fully was about 3 weeks. And that was like while I was still in school, so it wasn't what it is right now, where I'm on break right now, so I get to sit down and do workshop almost all day. Not really all day. I say I spend maybe like 5 hours a day during the break, but for a typical mode, I'd say probably around like 20 hours total.
So yeah, there are a lot of creations out there. What are some of your other favorite creators and game modes that you've seen out in the wild?
In the vein of like hero trainers, I gotta give a huge shout out to, I think their name is Plus or Minus. They made a really cool improved on an aid tool. And I know, like, you know, Darwin Streams is another fantastic creator, really made the on an aid tool really popular. But this on an aid tool like follows the projectile as it goes through the air, and when I first saw it, I was like, I audibly gasped in my room. I was like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
One thing we want to know is what are kinds of workshop modes that you want to see more of in the future? Like what is the untapped area that you want to see other creators make more of?
Just in general, I think there's huge potential for like arcade style game modes in the vein of Conquest, which is why I originally started making Conquest. But or for other arcade style game modes, and there are some out there like Capture the Crown, where a whole bunch of tracers are like blinking around trying to steal a crown from each other and like hold on to it for a long time. Yeah, I guess that's the kind of thing I'd like.
Yeah, for sure. While you have us here, if there was something that you could add to the workshop, like a feature, what would you add?
If I could add one thing to workshop, it would definitely, I now that I'm like thinking about it, it would definitely be like tidier visuals for, this is very selfish, but like tidier visuals for like objectives, because you know, for me, I've got like two texts just like sitting there as the indicators for like a capture point in Conquest. So I don't know, being able to add like, you know, the typical control point indicator just like right there would be pretty cool.
No, definitely makes sense. So we definitely see workshop as a jumping off point to kind of take on other programming or scripting challenges. We're wondering if you have ventured into any other programming or scripting languages besides the workshop.
I actually got started with my computer science major thanks to Minecraft command blocks and Redstone. And that I know that sounds crazy, but like, you know, it's this whole like spirit of, you see people make these really cool things in a game you play, and then you say, wow, how did they do that, right? Or at least for me, I say, how did they do that? Like, I didn't know that was possible, or like, wow, this is such a creative application of what's possible in the game, right? So for me, Minecraft was that jumping off point to look into how they made these things, look into kind of like how I could make my own ideas, right? And so, you know, eventually that ended up being my major, right? Computer science major. And so as part of that, I've obviously done a lot of programming in a lot of languages. Like, just to name a few off the top of my head, like Java, Ruby, C++, Python. I don't know why that escaped me for so long. Just slithered away. It was like, be gone. I'm sorry. Bad jokes. But yeah, I don't think Workshop has just kind of been a way for me to do the same thing that I've seen people do in Minecraft all those years ago. Like, you know, make cool things and hopefully get people inspired to see cool stuff being made, and then they'll hopefully ask themselves like, hey, how was that made? How can I make that myself, right? And so I think that's also why I'm really motivated to go into making like video tutorials that are easily digestible, that people can like pop open and be like, oh, I see, I can use that for like this thing now, right? And then they're on their way to making their own.
Oh, that's really cool. I always love hearing about people's different progressions through their education, through their computer science careers. So I have to ask, have you had the chance to collaborate with anyone else on a workshop mode?
Yeah, actually, so when we were talking about that Hero Protect and Ban mode, which was made for an amazing content creator, SVB. Huge shout outs to that guy. He does a lot of cool stuff for the workshop, podcasts. I know Zach's been on there on a few of those. But, the whole Hero Protect and Ban thing was for SVB for some of the pickup games he wanted to run. And in that mode, Josbird made the actual user interface, so to speak, right? The little cursor that goes around the screen, the heroes you can click on, and then I ended up handling the actual logistics behind the scenes, right? If you select this hero, how does the game keep track of that, right? And then how does the game tally the votes and then decide who to ban and who to protect?
Yeah. No, we'd love to hear more about kind of your experience with stuff like that in terms of what's it like to be a part of the workshop community, work with others, kind of make modes for players. What's it like to be a part of that?
It's in a word, incredible, because there's so many people with so many cool ideas out there that I'm just hoping to help people bring those ideas to fruition. Or in the recent pickup games with SVB, I think that was honestly the pinnacle of what I envision the workshop community being so far, because it's multiple workshop developers, admittedly two, but still multiple workshop developers working together on a single mode. And then we pass that off to SVB, who, organizes a whole bunch of content creators to come together and have fun with these modes, right? Get to try out some new experimental ideas. And in a sense, then I think that was the moment that the workshop community kind of became more than just the people who open up the workshop, right? It's the people who use those modes to make a cool new experience for everybody, or for the wider Overwatch community to enjoy.
Wow, yeah, that's really well spoken. I like that. So legendary streamer and former Overwatch League player Seagull is a huge fan of Conquest, I understand. So what was it like to watch him get to play the game?
As well as the other streamers that we saw from that other stream that happened. Just love to hear more about that.
So yeah, I posted that to kind of or to Seagull's Discord that he has for his community, and I was like, hey guys, check this out, right? Maybe play with your friends or something. And then the community came in and they were all like, hey Seagull, you should play. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I never thought it would get that far, but then Seagull himself picked it up, and it was like, wow, okay, I guess this is happening now. And just I think I speak to a lot of people's feelings within the workshop developer community that getting any kind of playtesting for your game is super difficult sometimes, because you can open up your game to the game browser, have people queue in, and they'll play a little bit, and then maybe they leave inexplicably, maybe they got a queue, or maybe they just decided your game was boring and they leave. That also happens, unfortunately. But just suddenly getting a solid playtest where people are playing the game as you intended, sort of not having random people queuing in, playing half a game and then suddenly their queue pops and they're gone, right? That was incredible, and that was it also helped me develop the mode more, in terms of balancing it. I don't think it's balanced at all right now, by the way. Please don't flame me. I can hear the people going to the Overwatch forums already. Nerf the capture rate, nerf the capture rate. Just getting that playtesting, and more importantly, getting to see people actually have fun with the mode, and at the end of it, type GG and be like, wow, that was incredible. And that was just one of the best feelings I've experienced in my life.
That's really inspiring. I have to say, do you have any encouraging words for maybe other people who might potentially get into workshops someday?
Encouraging words, I just say just remember everybody starts somewhere, and this is one of the biggest things that I try and remind people of. You'll see these people doing insane stuff, right? Making making like entirely fledged zombies modes, making like cars and all of that. But you know, going back to the whole like car mode, Grax is not necessarily like a coding expert, right? They're just really passionate about it, and they reached out for help. And like, don't be afraid to ask for help, definitely, right? Because that is how you learn. You try something, you fail, and then you say like, why didn't that work? And then, you know, a lot of times you don't know why it didn't work. So you can reach out to like forums or like a Discord community and be like, hey, you know, here's what I tried and I don't get it. Like, why didn't it work? And then I'm like 100% sure people will be there to help you. And it takes time and it takes practice. You will fail along the way. I mean, I still fail. Currently, the Brig trainer friggin' duplicates text whenever you go back to lobby. I still have to fix that. Even like the best workshop developers aren't perfect, and you won't be perfect either. But it's kind of the fun of it to me. And I hope you'll find that fun in making stuff in the workshop too.
Yeah, totally.
Did you ever think workshop would get to the point where people are making these like, hey, here's one workshop hero trainer for every hero, and then suddenly it's one of the best, or I'd argue one of the best pieces of educational content out there?
I can't speak for Zach. I know personally, I've always just been completely blown away by what I've seen in the workshop. I was thinking, oh, you know, they might make people run a little bit faster, run a little bit slower, and then maybe there'd be like a time limit associated with something. But we were thinking just kind of small, honestly. I had no idea you guys would be making these full-fledged new modes, things that don't even really resemble Overwatch anymore. Like, it's so awesome.
It's the same thing. I don't really know what I expected, but even though I don't know what I expected, everyone still blew my expectations away. I don't even know how that makes sense, but I love seeing what's come of it and where it's going. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I think on behalf of the whole workshop community, we are extremely grateful that you guys decided to push for the workshop to sort of like bring this new system in that allows us to sort of like shape Overwatch in ways maybe like nobody ever expected, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today, Kobe, but thank you for joining us. It's been awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We are now joined by Andy Bohan, no stranger to the workshop community. Andy has a deep catalog of experiments, utilities, and the occasional silliness. Whether you need to get stick bugged or just can't bear to look at the payload anymore, Andy's got you covered. Andy, glad you could join us.
Hey, how you doing, Dan?
Good to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question on everyone's mind. When are we going to see that Hammond bumper car mode?
So actually, I got to preview that question. So I'm going to have that released by BlizzCon on the code AND2Y. So when you see this, you'll be able to log into Overwatch, plug out the workshop code AND2Y, and you'll be able to play bumper cars and do all sorts of crazy things. It'll be the most amazing workshop mode you'll ever see.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
You finally have a use for your Andy code. I love it.
Well, yeah, you guys took my use. You put the green screen in, so I gotta, you know, it was previously the green screen code, so, yeah.
Well, what's next for you? Are you developing any other projects after the bumper card mode, after the green screen? Like, what's your current workshop project?
Honestly, it's just like whatever comes to my mind, you know, whatever weird, strange things. For me, like, workshop is almost like a faucet into the deepest part of my brain. You know, that weird dark part where the things that maybe you shouldn't think, maybe the things you shouldn't even put out into the world, but I do it anyway. So who knows? We'll only see, you know. If you see me in the newspaper for doing horrible things, dear God.
We won't hold it against you.
No.
Yeah.
Are there any like specific cool ideas you can share with us right now?
Honestly, that bumper car mode, which will be definitely released by BlizzCon. Some of the power-ups in that I'm really excited for. Things like, kind of the classic stuff like Big Head mode from the James Bond games, GoldenEye, freeze attacks. Basically, like, imagine Mario Kart, or for me, Crash Bandicoot, but in Overwatch on a little island, So it's all like the power-ups and stuff that I'm kind of excited to try out.
Totally. So how often do you try out these ideas? Like, how often do you hop into the workshop and try stuff?
I'd say pretty much like every day. Honestly, like usually it's not something huge. Like the way I like to do the workshop stuff is I like to show people what the potential is, and not like, I don't really want to spend 40 hours on a mode that is really cool probably, but will take 40 hours. I'd rather let that be up to the people who have like they have their singular idea and they really want to execute it. I'd rather be like, hey, here's this really cool thing you can do in the workshop that maybe you didn't know about before, and get that going and inspire other people.
Yeah, we're always a big fan of the stuff that you post, because it's like, oh boy, Andy posted something. Is there anything that you've shared with the community in particular that you're most proud of?
I'd say probably the green screen. Honestly, the fact that, like, I know for you guys work on not workshop, but Overwatch. Like, you guys work on it every day. But for me to see something that I know I wasn't like directly responsible or anything, but I'd like to think I had some amount of influence in showing that, yeah, that's something that people really want. So, for me, that's really cool to get something, a workshop mode I made, the green screen mode, and then to see that turned into a real map. That's so cool, And I really hope it's not just me. I hope other people get to experience that kind of, that feeling, and can influence, maybe not a map, but, have game modes make it to the game browser, that sort of stuff. Because I think something like that, say it happens to somebody who's learning programming, they're like, wow, that's so cool. So many people see my mode. Maybe they'll start a career in STEM, in career programming,
Yeah.
So yeah. Green screen, definitely that.
Exactly. I mean, you said you've already touched on that. You don't spend too much time on these modes because you want to you're just using workshop as an opportunity to play around with stuff. But typically, how long do you spend on like a singular idea before hopping to the next one?
That's kind of like my goal, is to just basically achieve as fast as I can to get from idea to finished product. Finished product being like, it may not be a playable mode, it may not be something that I can like post the code and people can play, because some things people think that, oh, I'd love to have Torbjorn wall climb or something like that, and then you make it and then people might play it, but it's like, well, okay, that's just Torbjorn wall climbing in the workshop. I mean, that's about 2 minutes of fun, but the visual is the interesting part, so I try and make sure I'm not spending too long on it. I'd say maybe like as little as 30 minutes to as long as 2 hours, and sometimes it'll go longer than that, but that's because I'm like going over the same idea and improving on it.
What's the coolest thing? Like, if you had to pick a singular coolest thing that's come out of the workshop so far, like a mode or a creator, like what is the coolest thing?
Coolest thing, honestly, I know this is kind of a nerdy one, but I think there's a thing called Overwatch Script to Workshop. It's made by a guy called Delton, and there's a bunch of collaborators on GitHub, Proto Walker being one of them. I'm sure there's many more I haven't mentioned, so sorry to those people. But it's a thing where you can write actual code for the workshop in the normal way that you would write as a programmer, in the sort of IDEs, the programming environments that you would normally use, and that gives you, it kind of removes a lot of the clunk that's in the workshop. I'm sure you guys can admit the workshop is kind of clunky and like not always super friendly to new users. So I think something like OSTW, Overwatch Script to Workshop, is super powerful in making it so that people who have these passionate ideas, they can make it in way faster time and not spend so much time kind of jumping around on the workshop UI. If you have a list of 100 rules, dear God, that's something to scroll through if you want to add one to the top.
Yeah. Well, if you had it your way, what is something that you would add to the workshop today if it was possible?
If it was possible, oh, map editor for sure. Like, I'm sure, I have no doubt the other guys probably said map editor too. I just think like map editor opens up a world of, just huge creativity, and it's kind of like bringing back the old modding scenes of like, I grew up playing like TF2 and all the Source games, and like there's huge modding communities around those. And I think if map editor existed for Overwatch, you would have that same stuff living now. That same stuff would come back to life, and that's it. Like, for anyone who's actually been in those, which maybe you guys have as game programmers, maybe you've been in them, it's such a satisfying collaborative experience. And that's something I wish more people would enjoy, more people would get the chance to enjoy. I mean,
you touched on this a little bit ago, but like about how Workshop is a cool opportunity for people to come together and collaborate and make cool stuff. I'm wondering if you've collaborated with anyone else on a Workshop mode or a demo or just something cool to show off.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think the coolest thing about the Workshop right now is, even though it's really at its infant stages, you have people like, there's the Elo Hell workshops, there's Grandeur Hammers, there's a bunch of Asian workshop creators that, granted, there's a language barrier and such, but with Google Translate and all those things, you can collaborate with them. And I've talked to them and, complimented the modes and, shown their modes to Westerners and shown our modes to them. And I think that the Workshop kind of breaks those language barriers in a way, because it's, at the end of the day, it's programming. Like, you don't need to know English, you don't need to know any other language other than just understanding the Workshop code itself, So for me, I don't necessarily collaborate with people because the stuff I make is like really short and kind of snappy stuff, and you don't really need anyone to collaborate with that. But in terms of like community collaboration, like getting people involved, getting people together, that's something I feel a lot about. Like that's something I'm really passionate about, is like getting people together, getting the really passionate people, the smart people, and even the people who think they can't do workshop stuff but might want to. Like those are the people that, once they jump into it, they'll realize it's super, super easy. To go from no workshop code at all to something impressive is, it's a really quick process compared to any other programming.
And we've seen a couple of videos that you've posted with all like your little experiments and your trials. And one thing is we saw a recent video where you gave Bastion his shield back, and we just want to know what fills your heart with so much evil in this world.
To suffer is to grow, and I think sometimes we all need to suffer just a little bit. So doing those things that might make people question, like, what is that? What did I just see? I think that adds something to the world. I think that's something of value, even though it seems very strange. And also, not to say anything, but hey, Blizzard added that before me. So, if we're going to be pointing fingers here.
Well, speaking of suffering, it's a weird segue, right? Speaking of suffering, who would win in a fight? A giant Torbjorn or those spinning nightmare Brigidas that you glued together that one time?
Oh man, I love my boy Torbjorn. Like, he's so good, But those Brigidas, they're just terrifying. I don't know how you defeat that. Like, it's got shields everywhere. It's got the flails going around. I don't think, as a giant Torbjorn, he's going to get whittled down. It's going to be 1,000 cuts. So I think that goes to Brigidas.
Yeah, that was one of the most terrifying videos I've ever seen, by the way.
It definitely scared us. But while you're here, I'd love to just kind of give you a chance to give you a little bit of a spotlight and say, like, if there are any creators or modes out there that deserve a shout out, like, I'd love to hear who are your favorite creators out there? Like, who do you want to give a special moment for? Sure,
I think so. Not really a creator, but somebody who's making huge value to the workshop community is Mitzi over at Elo Hell Workshops. So there's a website called workshop.codes that he works on, and he works on that, free of charge. I don't think there's even ads on the website. And that is such a huge value thing to the community, to have that repository of codes and access to modes, the ability to write descriptions and images and all that sort of stuff. That's way more valuable than any one contributor can give, because it's a place for the community to come together. So I'd say Mitzi definitely deserves a spotlight, and I think oftentimes people like that in the communities go unappreciated. So I'd say definitely Mitzi of workshop.codes.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. So you're undoubtedly a veteran in the community. Is there any advice that you could give to someone less experienced, like someone who's just discovering Workshop for the first time?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'd say the biggest thing is, if you're intimidated at all by things like programming, which for myself, like, I self-taught programming when I was 16, and I was terribly intimidated. Like, there's so many smart people in programming. There's just so much brain power. But something like the workshop, you really don't need to feel intimidated because it has all the tools for you to get going, get running, get an idea. Like basically just start off with a simple idea, say like, I don't know, I want to make Widowmaker really big and have her gun shoot green blobs or something like that, Start with that idea, see where you can break it down. So like, I want to make her bigger, and then break it down piece by piece. So I think just basically don't get overwhelmed. Don't try and make, Overwatch 3 in Overwatch 1 in the workshop. Don't go in like that. Because if you start off slow, it'll be really quick once you get going. Like you'll have a really easy time if you just pace yourself a bit. And like I said, don't get intimidated. And also there is so many people that are willing to help you and willing to spend their time helping you learn from your scripts, learn new ways of doing things. Yeah, just don't be intimidated and seek help. Like seriously, like just ask people for help. People are always happy. That's something I've always said in life is that ask for help. People are always happy to give it. So, and if they're not, they can just say no. What's the worst thing? That's not bad.
Well, awesome. I think that's pretty much it, Andy. Thank you so much. It was great to have you.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Yeah, I'll be seeing you. So,
thanks for joining us. Take care. For our last segment, we're going to take some time to answer some questions from the workshop community. First up, we have Darth Revel, who asks, is there something you tried to add to the workshop but couldn't? So there's very little that we can't ever add. There are plenty of things we haven't been able to get to yet, though. I think the thing that comes to mind for everyone is a level editor. It's something we'd love to have, but it would require multiple departments, require many people, many hours of work. So it's one of those things that's just, it's a difficult organizational challenge to make happen. Even so, if there is something that we're passionate about getting into the game, if we really work at it, we can make it happen eventually. So there is hope. For our next question, CACTUSPUPPY asks, are there any funny stories about the development of the workshop? So we did run into a puzzling situation at one point where I had developed something, a feature for the game. Keith Myron, who was working on the UI editor at the time, had developed a new UI editor feature, and we both needed to test it, but we really didn't know if our half had worked until we were sure that the other person's half had worked. So it became this weird chicken and egg thing where we weren't really sure if it was working correctly. So we ended up having to develop this sort of like additional text format, a little bit like the copy-paste format that we ended up with, just so we could test it. And anyway, that was kind of funny. We also had a number of modes we worked on internally that were pretty amusing, such as giving everyone blink, so anyone could blink. It was kind of chaotic, but pretty amusing.
I think the first one I ever saw was Reinhardt with blink, which was probably a little too OP, so we couldn't put it in the game, obviously. But for our next question, Wilkit asks, if you could add one feature to the workshop free of cost and work, what would it be? Like Dan said before, it's probably a level editor. It's the thing that everybody else wants, and it's something that we really want to do as well. If it was truly free of cost and work, I really can only imagine the kinds of crazy cool features the community could create with something like that.
RAINBOWMOM asks, what were the team's goals in adding the workshop, and how did they come to the final design? So Blizzard has a very rich history of letting creators build off of our game. And it's a tradition we definitely wanted to continue in Overwatch. So we realized that we could continue that tradition by exposing a lot of our internal scripting tools. And so if you think about the use of events and conditions and values to sort of drive actions, it's starting to sound a lot like Workshop, and that's because that's a lot. It's very similar to the way our internal scripting system works. So, and then the other half of it, the editor, we realized we needed something that was cross-platform. So whether you're using a mouse or you're using a controller, it's something you'll be able to create with. But we also understood people, wanted to work with text. So that's why we also included a copy-paste feature so that you could copy stuff out to text and edit it that way. So I hope that answers the question. But that's sort of what we were thinking when we designed each part of the work.
So next, Andy asks, what has been the most unexpected way you've seen the workshop being used? There really are way too many to count. But I definitely have to mention some of our personal favorites, which are the use of invisible dummy bots to play the piano in Paris. So they actually, the piano plays real notes, and so they actually have scripted modes that play full songs, which is really clever. We love the run from the black hole game mode, since it takes advantage of that huge expanse workshop map, which is just this infinite empty plane. And then there are just other modes that are just other games, other genres entirely. Like we've seen golf, we've seen shoot 'em ups, we've seen dungeon crawlers. I'm not really sure what we were expecting when we released the workshop, but the players have somehow exceeded that expectation and have been super creative in kind of pushing the boundaries of what Overwatch can really do.
Mitchell asks, which workshop game mode best encapsulates the workshop's intended function? So this is sort of interesting, sort of going to Zach's point. I mean, there was no direct way we expected or intended workshop to be used. We really just wanted to make our own authoring capabilities available for the Overwatch community at large, because we both strongly believed, like, you know, that we're going to get some really cool stuff if we just sort of let people go wild with this stuff. That having been said, you know, all of our tools are definitely geared around making Overwatch style game modes and extending the capabilities of existing heroes. So making, say, a top-down RTS is probably going to be a little more challenging. That said, you know, we have seen some stuff. We definitely know that kind of thing is possible. So I think the real answer there is whatever is in your heart, that is Workshop's intended function.
Absolutely. Next, Cactus Puppy asks, have there been any features that seemed easy to implement initially, but proved far more difficult than originally anticipated? The first thing that comes to mind is player scaling. And by player scaling, I mean changing the size of heroes so you can have really huge or really tiny players. This feature was actually implemented mostly by Derek Mulder, another one of our amazing gameplay engineers. And we were continually dismayed by the number of things that broke or had to be changed when scaling players, both from rendering and gameplay perspective. But Derek managed to get through all of that and get it working so smoothly, and we're honestly super grateful for that work, because we've seen so many fun modes, like real tiny Overwatch and other really large modes.
So Space Jester asks, were any features easier than expected to implement? So early on, a lot of the features we put in Workshop just kind of worked out of the box. It was kind of amazing, and it made sense. We were basically just hooking up, you know, action that we already used. I think probably the best example of that is all the stuff we can do with movement. You know, you can root people in place, make them move faster, slower. You can apply impulses to them, knock them around. I mean, this is stuff that we've been doing in Overwatch proper for forever. And this has always been what Overwatch is about. So, you know, it made a natural transition to Workshop. And, you know, it pleasantly surprised us how easy it went in. So I guess that qualifies. Next, we have Wilkit, who asks, what is your favorite Workshop feature that you've added? And I think I would have to say the patch where we added a lot of flow control features and some optimizations, make everything run faster. We removed the restriction on having a wait inside of loops. It was really, really satisfying to see, you know, just a few weeks later, all of the different modes that came out that were doing things that I knew couldn't have been done before. I mean, the number of calculations that these modes were doing is something that would not have been possible with the speed at which things ran before. So that was incredibly satisfying. Of course, that said, I think a close second would have to be that player scaling patch. It was such an attention-grabbing patch. You know, it was a lot of fun to see what people were doing with that.
We honestly just love anything that unlocks players' creativity, because we're still just blown away by what people can do.
For sure.
Arister asks next, what is your vision for Workshop for the foreseeable future? And really, our philosophy with Workshop is pretty simple. We really believe that we want to give the creative powers to our players, because we know they're going to create cool things that everyone will enjoy. Like, that's really it. As for surfacing these awesome creations to the rest of our player base, that's something that we definitely could do a better job of. And hopefully this panel is a start, because we know how creative our players are. We know how passionate they are. Like, it's really just about unlocking what they can make.
Totally agree. Arcana21 asks, which programming languages do you like working with most, and which would you recommend for game development? This is a common theme that we've actually heard a lot about people who get their start in workshop, and it's always a great honor to us whenever we hear that someone started in workshop and is interested in working in other environments. So I personally have used C++ for many decades now. It's by far the thing I'm most comfortable with. That said, there are actually a lot of different environments, a lot of different ways you can make games. Some engines that come to mind are Unity, Unreal. Both of them have different language backings. Unity's more, I think, C#. Unreal is C++, although both of them offer visual scripting solutions as well. So you can actually make games without having any sort of formal programming experience, which is really cool. Game Maker is another tool. It's based on visual scripting languages. Anyway, long story short, there are lots of ways to make games. I think the secret is to find something you're comfortable with, find a language you're comfortable with. It doesn't hurt to learn some of the C-based languages, C++, C#. But honestly, just pursue whatever seems like the right fit.
Ilcade asks, how do you determine which new features come to the workshop? It's actually a very informal process where Dan and I will listen to a lot of feedback from creators and consider for each feature, like how long it would take to implement it, how risky it is, and other such costs like that. We try to think of just cool ideas that aren't necessarily being asked for, but that's something we could surprise people with, like player scaling. And in the end, we come up with a plan each patch based off what people would appreciate the most. And then we judge that based off how much time we actually have to complete that patch. And that's what we pitch to the rest of the team before moving forward. And then another question from Will Kit. Are features prioritized based on player feedback or internal road mapping? And the answer is both. We think about all the cool things we want to add. We listen to player feedback, like I said before. And from that, we come up with that list of cool new features and bugs that we want to fix. We implement all the new features, and if we are able to finish all of them, great. And otherwise, if we don't, we have to come back. We have to delay them for a future patch. But then we always focus on some time on fixing bugs. And in the end, each patch is a nice mix of new features, quality of life improvements, and bug fixes. And that's pretty much it. That's our last question. Before we go, I just wanted to give a big shout out to everyone on the workshop forums for asking a lot of these questions. Various discords dedicated to the workshop community, like the Elo Hell Workshop Discord and the Grander Hammers Discord, and honestly, so many others. And even various Overwatch subreddits that are out there. You guys are the best, and we can't thank you enough.
And thanks for everyone who's watching. We're incredibly lucky to have such an engaged and awesome community. And we can't wait to see what sorts of cool workshop modes you all come up with next. So thank you again, good luck, and see you in the workshop.
Take care, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of BlizzConline.